Western Hills was an ordinary, unremarkable town in Maine. It was a place where life went on as usual. Children played in the streets, old people discussed the news at a local diner, and in the evenings the melodious ringing of bells could be heard from a small church. This city was one of those points on the map that many people didn't even know existed unless they lived nearby. Surrounded by dense forests and green hills, Western Hills has always seemed like a calm corner of stability, as if time had slowed down here. But one day, early in the morning at dawn, strange lights appeared on the horizon. They were moving too fast for an airplane and too quiet for a helicopter. The city was still asleep. Only a few residents noticed this unusual phenomenon, but the lights disappeared as suddenly as they appeared. It might have seemed that the ground seemed to tremble underfoot for a few seconds, but no one paid any attention to this. A few hours later, only an empty plain remained in place of Western Hills. No houses, no cars, no people. Nothing. FedEx representatives were the first to suspect something was wrong. Their van, heading to Western Hills, could not find the town, although the navigator clearly indicated that the driver had reached his destination a long time ago. When local services tried to contact residents, no one answered. Not a single call, not a single signal. That evening, the state police office dispatched a patrol car to find out what had happened. The officers set off along the familiar road that led to the city, but after a few hours, only one of them returned, and he was unable to say a word. Nothing was clear. A few hours later, emergency services and a group of journalists left in the direction of Western Hills. Upon their arrival, only emptiness greeted everyone. The place where houses, streets, and schools used to stand was now just a plain. "It's impossible," the police officer said, looking around the space in confusion. "There was a city here just yesterday. I was here myself last week." The head of the emergency services nodded. His face was pale. "We've contacted the Pentagon," he replied. "No one can understand what happened. Even satellite images don't show anything, just an empty land, as if nothing had ever happened here." "But how is this possible?" A reporter who was preparing to go live interjected. "We know that cities don't just disappear." He raised the camera, pointing it at the lifeless landscape that had once been Western Hills. "Residents of this town, where are they? Where could they have disappeared to?" No one answered him. Later, at the local news bureau, journalists discussed what had happened. "Maybe it was some kind of natural cataclysm," one of the editors suggested. "An earthquake? A landslide?" "No, that's impossible," his colleague interrupted. "There are no traces of destruction left. The whole ground is flat, as if it was specially leveled. In addition, seismologists have not recorded any anomalies. The city just disappeared." The senior editor, a man with thick gray hair, looked at his staff with a gloomy expression on his face. "I've been in the news business for almost 30 years. He said quietly, "and I've never seen anything like it. It's something else, something that we can't explain yet." The journalists exchanged anxious glances, realizing that this story was likely to become the biggest mystery of their careers. The disappearance of Western Hills quickly became a sensation in the world news. Leading TV channels discussed various versions, from natural disasters to extraterrestrial interventions. All kinds of theories were circulating on the internet, from the most absurd to the pseudoscientific. Some talked about secret government experiments, others about strange atmospheric phenomena, but none of the versions explained the fact that the whole city had disappeared without a trace. "It's like someone took an eraser and just wiped Western Hills off the map," the head of the search team said in an interview. "No signs of destruction, no debris, no bodies. Absolutely nothing." A few weeks later, the search was officially stopped. Having found no answers, the authorities decided to close the case. The city and its inhabitants have become just another mystery, forgotten in the archives. Over time, the media switched to other news, and the Western Hills story slowly sank into a sea of other incidents. Only those who had relatives or friends living there remembered the city, The others no longer cared about all this, but from time to time, on quiet nights, when the sky was covered with fog, lights from lanterns that stood on the streets of the town seemed to appear in this haze. 15 long years have passed since the city of Western Hills disappeared from the face of the earth. However, for a small group of amateur researchers, this story remained an unsolved mystery that stirred their minds. Recently, a strange seismic activity was recorded in that area. This event again drew attention to the vanished city, and the group decided to go there to see with their own eyes what could cause such fluctuations. A small jeep was slowly moving along an old, abandoned road leading to the place where the largest tremors were recorded. The members of the group were young scientists and fans of all sorts of paranormal stories: Steve, Laura, and Max. "Do you even believe that we will find something here?" Laura asked, peering into the dense forest surrounding the road. "I mean, it's been 15 years. What evidence could be left here?" Steve, who was leading the group, turned to her. "Seismic activity in this area is not accidental. Something happened, and I'm sure it has to do with that disappearance." Max, sitting in the back seat and checking the equipment, noticed these fluctuations could be caused by anything: underground rivers, faults in the Earth's crust. But you understand that the government has not given any answers. We'll have to figure out what happened ourselves. After a few hours, they finally arrived at the place. The young people were shocked by what they saw. In front of them was not a forest, not fields and hills. In front of them were ruins. It was Western Hills, once a thriving town, only now it looked like footage from an apocalypse movie. Streets and houses were destroyed, as if centuries of desolation had passed here. Houses covered with moss and climbing plants were half destroyed. The streets, once busy, have now turned into wild trails. "It's just unbelievable," Laura muttered, getting out of the car and looking around. "This can't be happening. There has been nothing here for many years." Steve walked closer to one of the dilapidated buildings and gently touched the wall. Stones began to fall under his fingers. "How can this be? The city disappeared 15 years ago, but it looks like several centuries have passed." There was tension in his voice. "Such a condition of buildings is simply impossible to explain." Max took out his camera and started filming. "Steve, you have to see this. There's something interesting here," he said, walking up to one of the walls. There were strange symbols on the wall of the old building. They were engraved or burned into the stone, as if by someone or something. "What the hell is this?" Laura muttered, looking closer. "I've never seen anything like it." "We could send these signs to the university for decoding, but something tells me that they won't find anything like this in their archives." Steve picked up a piece of stone with the same symbols on it and felt a slight vibration passing through his fingers. He looked at the stone in surprise, then raised his head. "Do you feel it?" he said, looking around at the others. "What is it exactly?" Laura came closer. "I don't feel anything." At that moment, the air suddenly became moist and warm, like before a summer thunderstorm. Laura froze in place, listening. The wind was very loud, as if someone was talking right behind them, but when they turned around, there was no one there. "What was that?" Max looked scared for the first time. "I heard something." "It's not the wind," Steve said, gripping the rock tighter. "Something's not right here. We are not alone." The guys continued to comb through the ruins of the city, trying to find at least something that could explain the strange events that happened in Western Hills 15 years ago. Laura went into one of the dilapidated houses. She looked around the rooms. Everything was covered with dust, and strange scratches could be seen on some objects, as if some kind of animal was tearing them to pieces. In the bedroom, she noticed an old, almost collapsed closet. It was barely standing on its rickety legs, and there was a stack of papers on the shelves, darkened by time. She reached out cautiously and pulled out a battered notebook with a peeling leather cover. "Guys, come here!" she called out to the others. Steve and Max came closer. "What is it?" Max asked, glancing at the dusty notebook. "It looks like a diary," Laura replied, dusting the cover. "It must be someone's personal diary." Perhaps it was written by one of the residents shortly before the disappearance. "Open it," Steve said, trying to hide his excitement. Laura carefully opened the notebook, and they saw the uneven lines written in a trembling hand. The first few pages were covered with notes about everyday life, work, family, minor problems. But then the handwriting became more and more confused. "There's something strange here," Laura whispered, starting to read aloud. March 17th. A strange fog appeared on the horizon today. We didn't pay attention to him at first. It seemed like an ordinary morning steam rising from the river, but it was getting thicker by the hour, and now it seems that the fog surrounds the whole city. People started to get nervous. March 18th. The fog has become denser and now looks like a dome covering us. Locals say that communication with the outside world has completely disappeared. Neither phones nor radios work. Laura paused, exchanging glances with Steve and Max. Shock was reflected on their faces. "The dome?" Max asked. "What does that even mean?" Steve frowned. "Maybe it wasn't an ordinary fog. Maybe it's something artificial." "Read on, Laura," Max muttered, clearly nervous. March 20th. People started disappearing. At first, these were isolated cases. Someone did not return home after work. Someone disappeared on the way to the store. We decided that they had simply gone into the woods or gone to another city. But now, there are too many of them, and everyone is silent. No one heard a sound. People disappear without a trace, as if they never existed. Did people disappear? Laura looked nervously at the boys. "It's terrible." "That's not the worst part," Steve pointed to the next page. "Look what's next. March 25th. An epidemic has started in the city. People start to get sick, complain of headaches and strange symptoms, hallucinations, panic attacks. They say they hear whispers. I feel something similar myself. It feels like someone is watching me. Everywhere. All the time. March 27th. A real nightmare is happening in the city. People lose their minds and start attacking each other. Paranoia has gripped everyone. I locked myself in the house. I do not know what is going on, but I no longer trust anyone. Laura abruptly closed the diary, her fingers trembling. She was breathing heavily, as if she herself was experiencing what is described in these lines. I do not know what it was, but it seems that this is not just a natural cataclysm. It's something paranormal. Max looked depressed. We're dealing with something much more dangerous than we thought. Dome. It could have been a virus, Laura suggested. Or mind. Altering. Steve added, rubbing his chin. Paranoia, hallucinations. All of this could have been caused by something that we can't even explain scientifically. Max was silent for a few seconds before he squeezed out. We shouldn't have come here. It's too late now, Max. Steve got to his feet. We're already here. We need to find out exactly what happened here. He took the diary from Laura's hand and read the last entry. March 29th. I'm alone. The whole city was engulfed in darkness. I hear footsteps outside the door, but I'm afraid to open it. If you are reading this, please know that they have come for us. We were trapped, and now no one is going to escape. Something is moving among us. A gloomy silence covered the ruins of Western Hills. Steve, Laura, and Max carefully made their way through overgrown trails and ruined buildings. Soon they came to an old building that had once been a hardware store. His sign hung on rusty brackets that did not inspire confidence. The letters were erased, but the outlines were still discernible. Techno Market Western. You can find something useful here, Steve said, stepping over the collapsed door first. Perhaps some data has been preserved. Inside, everything was in chaos. Broken storefronts, broken appliances, and appliances covered with a thick layer of dust. The sun was shining through the cracks in the roof, casting long shadows on the floor. Laura quickly scanned the shelves, turning over the trash in search of at least some clues. Nothing, she said, brushing off her hands. Everything was destroyed long ago. Max was already on his knees at the counter at that time, turning over boxes and old documents. Suddenly, his hand came across a small plastic object. "Hey guys, look!" he exclaimed, picking up the flash drive. "I found something." Steve came over, frowning. "A flash drive. It may be empty." "Let's check it out," Max said, taking his laptop out of his backpack. He quickly plugged in the USB flash drive and waited impatiently for the device to open. For a few seconds, the screen remained black and it seemed that nothing would happen. But suddenly, a window blinked and a video recording opened in front of them. The video started with a faint camera shake. The operator, obviously a local resident, judging by the footage, was frantically holding the device, trying to focus on what was happening around him. For the first few seconds, the image was blurred. There were staccato sounds of breathing and occasional snatches of speech. The camera was spinning, as if a man was in a hurry to capture everything around him. The central street of the city appeared on the screen, but something was clearly wrong. The sky looked gloomy and heavy, covered with a strange gray-green fog. Terrified residents scurried through the streets. Screams could be heard in the distance, which were getting louder by the second. "What the hell is this?" Laura whispered, peering at the screen. "Wait," Steve replied. "This is just the beginning." The camera jerked. The cameraman turned it towards the sky. Among the clouds, huge shadows were moving, smoothly descending down. They didn't look like animals or people. The shadows gradually became more distinct. These creatures, resembling tall, thin figures with elongated heads and long limbs, descended directly from the sky onto the streets of the city. Their movements were silent and smooth, as if they did not obey the Earth's gravity. "Oh my God!" Max breathed, without taking his eyes off the screen. At that moment, the camera zoomed in on one of the creatures. There were glowing streaks on his body, reminiscent of the strange symbols they had seen in the city, and his skin was covered with what looked like metal plates. In their hands they held long devices that emitted bright light. The people nearby suddenly froze in place. The creatures touched them with their devices and people disappeared without a trace. Their bodies seemed to disappear into thin air, as if they had been moved to another dimension. "It's not just a kidnapping," Steve said. The cameraman, clearly in a panic, tried to film everything that was happening, but his breathing became more frequent and his hands were shaking. He ran down the street, capturing scenes on camera that sent goosebumps down the scientists' backs. People tried to hide in houses, but the creatures didn't give them a chance. Their every move was precise and methodical. It seems that they possess technologies that humanity has not yet seen. At one point, the camera jerked sharply and turned towards the city center. There was a group of people standing in the square, surrounded by several creatures. One of them took out a small spherical object and threw it on the ground. The sphere began to emit a bright light, and all the people in the square disappeared at the same time, as if they were sucked into an invisible portal. "We shouldn't have come here," Max whispered, stepping back from the screen. "It was an alien invasion." The camera was shaking again. The cameraman was trying to find shelter by running into one of the houses. There, he finally turned the camera on himself. The man's face was wet with sweat, and his eyes reflected real horror. "If anyone sees this," he began, stammering and breathing heavily. "They came for us. They're taking us away. We can't hide. Everything you see will disappear soon." At that moment, the man turned the camera to the window, and one of the figures appeared in the frame. The screen went blank. "That's it," Laura recoiled, pushing her laptop away. "They were doing something here. I don't think they just came to kill. Rather, it was a training ground." Steve stood up slowly, his face pale. "Yes, the city has become a testing ground for testing or research." Max, still shaken, stared at the screen that had turned off. If they could do it then, what's to stop them from coming back again? "Did they leave?" he asked, adding softly. "Maybe they didn't leave. Maybe they took off the dome for a reason." Laura swallowed. She was really scared. "We have to go back and tell you about it. People need to know the truth." Steve nodded. "If they let us leave." After Steve, Max and Laura discovered the creepy footage on the flash drive. They realized that the case was much more serious than the simple disappearance of the city. Without wasting any time, they sent the collected data to the authorities. A couple of hours later, the answer came. Urgent measures were taken. Western Hills has once again become the object of increased attention, but this time at the government level. A military convoy arrived in the city, dozens of trucks, armored vehicles, and mobile laboratories. Helicopters began circling over the city, circling the area and carefully examining the ruins. Sniper towers were installed on the roofs of the surviving houses. The army was preparing for possible threats. The military wasted no time. Their task was clear: to identify all possible threats and find out exactly what happened in Western Hills. Groups of soldiers combed the streets of the city, carefully passing through each destroyed house, looking into underground utilities and carefully examining the walls, which still had strange symbols found earlier by Steve and his team. "Captain, Sector 3 is clear," one of the commanders reported over the radio. "We are moving further along the eastern section." The soldiers worked with extreme caution, using special sensors to detect radiation, chemicals, or biological threats. But during the day, nothing unusual was found, except for strange vegetation and mold. In the late afternoon, a group on the west side of the city came across an old manhole leading underground. Lieutenant Dorsey, who leads the patrol group, signaled to stop. "It looks like an old bunker," one of the soldiers said, examining the hatch. "Maybe there's something left inside." Dorsey nodded. "Try to open it." The hatch creaked, but it gave way. The soldiers removed the lid and saw a staircase leading down into the darkness. The smell of dampness and mustiness hit their nostrils as they began to descend inside. At the bottom in front of them was a long corridor leading deeper. The walls were cold, covered with mold and traces of rust. The air was heavy, but despite this, the patrol moved forward. Soon they reached a massive metal door that resembled the entrance to a reinforced compartment. "Something's not right here," one of the soldiers said quietly, glancing at the strange markings on the door. "It looks like it's not just a bomb shelter." Lieutenant Dorsey gave the command to break down the door. It opened with a heavy metallic screech, and a small room opened in front of them, inside which there was a capsule. The room looked as if someone had carefully hidden it. The lighting was weak, but bright enough for them to see the contents of the capsule. A soldier stepped forward with a flashlight and saw a frozen creature inside the capsule. "Oh my God," he muttered. "Is this what we saw on the video?" The creature inside the capsule was identical to what was seen in the gruesome footage from the flash drive, an elongated figure with long limbs and narrow, alien features. His skin was covered with what looked like metal plates glowing with a strange greenish light. The creature looked frozen or paralyzed. "It's an alien!" one of the soldiers gasped. "What the hell is he doing here?" Dorsey came closer, examining the capsule carefully. "Is it still alive?" "What is it?" he asked, turning to his subordinates. "Contact the command. We need more people here." The news of the discovery quickly spread throughout the camp. Biologists, physicists, and chemists were soon called to the site to study the creature. An operational base was deployed right at the site of the bunker's discovery, and several portable laboratories were delivered to the city. "We've never seen anything like it," said one of the biologists, examining the creature through the glass of the capsule. "It's like suspended animation. They probably use some kind of technology to temporarily freeze their bodies. We need to do an analysis." Doctors and chemists carefully scanned the capsule, collecting data on the creature's condition and its surroundings. "If it wakes up, we have to be ready for anything," one of the military engineers warned. "Don't forget what happened to this city." "This creature may not be the only one," Laura muttered, watching from afar. "What if there are more of them and they come back?" Steve stood nearby, looking at the capsule through the monitors. He knew that the next step could decide the fate of all mankind. "I don't know what awaits us, but one thing is for sure. They didn't just leave him here." The military and scientists gathered around the capsule with the frozen creature. There was a mobile laboratory near it, where scientists worked for several days. The question of the fate of the alien creature became the subject of a fierce dispute between the two camps. The military insisted on the immediate destruction of the capsule and the city, and scientists convinced them that the creature needed to be studied in order to get answers to questions that could change the fate of mankind. Colonel Grayson stared at the creature lying in the capsule. His face expressed horror. "We can't take any chances. This creature is a direct threat. This whole city was wiped off the face of the earth because of them. Who knows what it can do if you wake it up? My suggestion is to destroy the capsule and wipe out everything connected with this city. This is the only way to ensure that it doesn't hurt anyone else." He turned to his subordinates, giving a short order. "Prepare the charge and contact the aviation. We have to be ready to destroy this place." Lieutenant Dorsey nodded in agreement with the commander. "The colonel is right. We can't take any chances. As much as we would like to know more about them, the price is too high. Who knows what will happen if this creature breaks free? We saw the diaries of that man and the footage from the flash drive. They would have destroyed this city without hesitation. It is better to resolve this issue now than to give a chance for a new attack." Objections of scientists. Dr. Emily Carter, the leader of the team of scientists, jumped forward, trying to contain her emotions. Her voice trembled with anger and disappointment. "You want to destroy what could be the greatest discovery in the history of mankind. We have found evidence of the existence of another civilization. Their technology can explain what is happening to us and why they are here. If we destroy the capsule, we will lose the chance forever. We have no right to act so recklessly." She took a step towards the colonel, trying to convince him of the importance of studying the creature. "Colonel, we can prevent further threats if we understand what we're dealing with. We have the technology, we have the equipment. We can protect ourselves. We must use this chance to understand their intentions and, perhaps, learn how to defend ourselves against such threats in the future." Dr. Jones, the biologist standing next to her, supported Carter. "We have no idea what this creature is like, but judging by his condition, it was not by chance that he was put into suspended animation. This may be an opportunity to study their biology, their technology. We can not only understand how they interact with people, but also perhaps use this knowledge for our own benefit." Carter took a deep breath and added, "By destroying the capsule, we will ruin a unique chance to find out the truth. This is our only chance to meet something beyond our understanding. Give us some time. We can handle it." The air in the laboratory changed instantly. Sensors installed around the capsule suddenly began to emit sharp, piercing signals. "What's going on?" Colonel Grayson shouted, turning sharply to the scientist. The technician standing next to the monitors turned pale. "The energy surges are off the scale. The creature is starting to wake up." Everyone instantly tensed up. The military raised their weapons. The snipers on the roof already had their fingers on the triggers, waiting for the order. The room became quiet. Only the signals of the equipment continued to sound like the ominous rhythm of an impending disaster. The creature in the capsule began to move. At first, there were barely noticeable twitching of his fingers. Then his eyes, covered with a thin membrane, began to slowly open, reflecting the light of the devices. It seemed like a cross between an animal and a machine. The colonel did not hesitate, grabbed the radio. "All units be ready. If this creature moves, we will destroy it." Without hesitation, the military immediately took up positions, raising their weapons aimed at the capsule. The tension reached its limit as the creature slowly opened its huge eyes full of unfathomable light. Dr. Carter, barely able to contain her panic, ran up to the capsule. Her voice was trembling, but she tried her best to keep her composure. "I beg you, don't do this. We don't know what's going to happen yet." She leaned closer to the capsule, her hands running over the control panel, trying to stabilize the equipment. "It can carry knowledge that will save us all," she shouted, casting anxious glances at the colonel and the soldiers standing with weapons at the ready. "Give me a chance, I beg you." The creature finally came to its senses. At that moment, something happened. Dr. Carter suddenly felt a wave of nausea. Her head was spinning. She staggered back, trying to grab onto the panel, but her vision was blurry. She was no longer in the lab. Strange distorted images began to appear before her eyes. She saw the world of these creatures. Huge dark cities that stretched to infinity, laboratories where incredible experiments were carried out. It was as if her mind had plunged into someone else's reality. She saw the aliens who came to Earth and realized that this was not a random attack. She saw Western Hills at the moment it all started. A huge dome of gas. People disappearing from the streets, going nowhere, as if they had been transported to another dimension. Then another scene appeared before her eyes. Strange laboratories where hybrid creatures. Children were seen, strangely resembling both humans and aliens. Their bodies were slender and graceful, but their faces reflected something familiar, human. They were the result of experiments, born to unite the two races. Dr. Carter realized that this creature was an important part of some kind of experiment. She saw a woman who looked like a human, but her eyes radiated something alien. She stood in the dark laboratory, stroking her belly, which glowed with a dim light. The visions grew, becoming more intense. Carter realized that the creature in the capsule was not just an alien. It was a woman who was preparing for the birth of a hybrid child, a new creature capable of living between worlds. The visions abruptly disappeared, and Carter found herself back in reality. She was breathing heavily. Her hands were shaking. She looked up and saw the military slowly approaching the capsule. "Don't shoot!" she screamed, her voice filled with terror. "Don't you dare! She's about to have a baby." The solution opened up by itself. The sensors did not stop screaming, and the creature in the capsule reacted more and more actively to the changes. Dr. Emily Carter, driven by strange impulses that came to her mind, stood in front of the capsule. She understood that she could not allow the military to destroy something so unique, something that could change humanity's entire understanding of life in the universe. The capsule had to be opened. Emily went to the panel and entered the code that appeared in her mind, as if it had been transmitted by a creature. With a soft hiss, the capsule began to open, releasing a faint bluish light. An alien lay inside, her body shimmering with a mysterious light, and her face expressed calmness, despite her obviously painful condition. "We have to help her," Emily whispered, realizing that there was no instruction for such a moment. She had never delivered a baby, even from humans, let alone aliens. The scientists watching the scene immediately surrounded her. "The colonel must leave," she said sharply, looking back at the military, who were still standing with their weapons at the ready. One of the doctors supported her. "We have to ensure privacy. Colonel, this is not a combat action. This is a medical case." After a minute's argument, the scientists managed to expel the military from the laboratory. Now, they were on their own. The birth lasted several hours. The alien was breathing heavily, her body becoming weaker with every passing moment. Emily acted on the impulses emanating from the creature. She knew every step, as if someone had conveyed this information to her on the level of intuition, or through the connection they had established earlier. Scientists helped the creature using everything at hand, medical instruments designed for humans, but now there was no choice. However, they managed to cope. Emily felt a huge responsibility and understood the importance of what was happening more and more by the minute. She knew that the child was the key to the future of humanity. When it was over and the baby was born, the alien, breathing heavily, looked at Emily with eyes full of gratitude. Her hands were shaking, but she carefully picked up her newborn baby in her arms. After hours of hard work, Emily Carter walked out of the lab. Her face was tired, but her eyes were burning with determination. "We did it, Colonel," she said with a sense of relief. "The baby was born. Now we need time to figure out what to do next." Grayson looked at her with a cold expression on his face. "I've contacted the Minister of Defense." His voice was harsh. "We have received clear orders. We will take this child and destroy the city. We cannot risk this threat getting out of control." Emily froze, her heart constricted with horror. "No, you can't!" she exclaimed. "This is not a threat. This is a chance for peace. We can learn so much. Please give me 5 more minutes. I'll take the necessary measurements and then we can draw the right conclusions. Grayson hesitated for a moment, then nodded. 5 minutes, Carter. Only 5. Emily quickly returned to the lab. Her thoughts were racing wildly, and only one fear sounded in her head. They wanted to take the child and destroy everyone. She approached the alien, who was already beginning to recover from childbirth, and, breathing heavily, said, "You need to save your baby. They want to take him away. You have to run. Save him." She repeated it over and over again, hoping that she would understand her. Images flashed through Emily's mind, visions that the creature was passing on to her. She felt the danger growing. "Save your baby," she repeated desperately. At that moment, the door burst open with a bang. The military burst into the laboratory. They acted quickly and without hesitation. "Get her away from the capsule!" one of the soldiers shouted, pointing the barrel at Emily. The shot rang out unexpectedly. Emily collapsed to the floor, her body in unbearable pain. It all happened so fast that she didn't even have time to realize what had happened. The alien jumped to her feet at that moment. Her eyes flashed with a fierce light. She raised her arms and with the help of an invisible force paralyzed all the soldiers in the room. They froze, as if invisible shackles had shackled their movements. Colonel Grayson, seeing what was happening, reached for his radio, but couldn't. Her strength was too great. He clutched his head, trying to resist the pressure, but suddenly his face contorted in pain. The alien exploded his eardrums in one motion, causing him to collapse to his knees with a cry of horror. The alien, holding the baby in her arms, approached Emily, who was lying on the floor, bleeding. She gently bent over her and touched her forehead, transmitting a kind of energy that instantly relieved her pain. "Thank you," Emily whispered, barely conscious. The alien glanced at the capsule's control panel and quickly typed something on the screen. A few seconds later, lights appeared in the sky above the city again, the same lights that Emily had seen the first time when Western Hills disappeared. The entire space around the laboratory shone, and the light grew brighter. The alien holding the baby and Emily plunged into these lights, and the three of them disappeared.